Whatever the ceiling is for this football team, does Luke Fickell have enough staff to both bring in and develop the talent? Plus, Greg Gard season may be over, but the portal season is just beginning. I'm Rajiv. He's Justin. Here we go.
Welcome to the Bucky Report, your destination for all things Wisconsin Badgers. Authentic takes.
Oh my God.
Game analysis.
Touchdown Badgers! Ring one up!
And discussion from the fan perspective.
Woo-hoo!
Thanks for joining us and on Wisconsin.
Welcome to the Bucky Report. We are your hosts, Rajiv and Justin, back together on a Sunday evening to talk about all things Wisconsin Badgers. On today's show, we continue looking ahead to the 2025 football season by talking in detail about the coaching staff. Is this group good enough to help the team reach their ceiling? We break down each coordinator and position coach, give you our grades, and talk through positives and negatives of each. The transfer portal is open and already making news. With the massive turnover Greg Gard will have on his roster, we talk through what types of players and who specifically Greg Gard needs to land in the offseason to replicate and build upon the success of 2024. We're going to talk about players that we've been linked with and potential guys that we could hopefully sign in the transfer portal. We are at the Bucky Report on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what we're doing, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button so you know when we make new content. Always appreciate the support for the show. Justin, really sad that we weren't involved in the 16 and 8 rounds that happened today. 4 number 1 seeds go to the Final Four. Absolutely crazy. Let's just kind of quickly start there. How are you doing? Did you watch the games? Because I have trouble watching games after we lose. Did you watch them, and how do you feel about the Final Four?
I watched parts of all of them, minus the Houston game. I missed that, but I've seen enough Houston this year to kind of have a feel for them. Really good perimeter defending team. Maybe don't get to the rim or get to the line as much as you'd like to see. That's a team that's going to be potentially, the way I see it, them playing Duke, it's either they're going to defend the heck out of Duke and make them turn that game into a grinder, or Duke is going to come into that game and just run over them. But yeah, these games were good. See, Michigan State was an interesting one because they exactly what I thought was going to be a problem for them was a problem for them. Their lack of perimeter shooting absolutely killed them in the worst opportunity time, because you played a team in Auburn that has more size than you and is similar to you athletically. So they got to that point where they had to face a team and they had to be able to put up shots from the outside to stretch things out, and they couldn't do it. And they had so many out of control shots at the rim in this game that they just missed, that I was like, you guys had opportunities to score in this first half and close it tight, and they couldn't do it. Auburn's size is a problem.
Yeah, I watched some of it. Same. I can't. I struggled. The one game I wanted to watch was the Michigan State game because I was rooting for Michigan State, Big Ten. I also have them winning in my bracket, so like I wanted them to make the Final Four. Plus, I like Tom Izzo. Yeah, that was disappointing, man. Auburn size. Holy crap, dude. Every single shot that Michigan took was affected by their size and that defense. Like even shots that they were wide, even layups, they were missing layups because they were constantly in their heads about being affected by the blocks of these massive guys at Auburn. I have to give it to the SEC. I was pretty critical of the fact they got 14 teams, and I think that 14 teams was crazy. That still shouldn't have happened. However, the top of that conference, holy crap, man. Florida's really good. Auburn's really good. Duke, we know, is good. Should have had Con Knipple, but whatever. Bo Dragon, I see you. He says, I guess Con made the right choice. No, he didn't, Bo. He didn't.
I don't know how much better is Wisconsin this year if they have Con.
Seriously. Oh my gosh. And Houston, I think, loses to Duke, but it's hard for me to watch, man. It's difficult. I was happy to see. I watched the Purdue game. I thought they played a really good game against Houston. That was a good game to watch. I wish they would have beat Houston, but nonetheless, we digress. Let's stay on basketball a little bit. We'll touch on basketball first. So we're gonna kind of go through a little bit of portal stuff. We got a long offseason ahead, but the portal is churning very, very quickly. So we'll quickly talk through what we think we need, and then some guys that we've already been linked to. A good reporting out there by Dylan Graff and guys over Badgers Wire, Badger Notes, everything. There's a lot of names out there already. So we're going to touch on some of those, give you our opinions of them and who we think might sort of fit in with this team. But as it sits now, Justin, It's not looking good. We've lost pretty much everybody. I mean, we're not as bad as Indiana. We've got people coming back, but we've got new guys. But for me, point guard, wing, 5. Those are like the absolute musts, right? You cannot go into next season without having a point guard who can actually run point, not John Blackwell running point, because that doesn't work. You need a guy that can actually do that. And you need more 3-point shooters. You got to have a wing that can replace Tanjay. And of course, we need a big. Do you agree that is that kind of where you are as far as what we need to bring in?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's simple, and it's basically what we need almost every year, which is a true point or somebody close to it, a 5, and an athletic wing. Like this team, until they can fill those spots, they're not going to be a balanced enough team to really make a run. And the 5 is going to be borderline impossible to find with the amount of money that's going to be put out there. You're going to have to find somebody that's got warts. Ideally, you find somebody who is athletic and can at least block shots and rebound, but you're not going to find somebody that's going to be a true problem in terms of an interior scorer unless he's just a horrific defender. And Wisconsin can't afford to have that anymore. Like we've seen that game play out too many times.
It's the defense the last 2 seasons has been maddening, by the way. And then when you see teams like Auburn and what they did today defensively, and Michigan State for that matter, they dominated the Big Ten in defense, and that's just frustrating that we, after watching that BYU game, yikes. But hey, at least, by the way, I'm perfectly happy that BYU got thumped by Alabama because Alabama ended up losing. I don't care. They gave up one of the most, I think it might have been the highest points ever given up in an NCAA tournament game, I think, or very close to it. What BYU gave up to Alabama, I think it was 110 or 20. I don't know what it was. It was crazy. BYU got beat. Those guys were dirty. They were trash talkers. I didn't like them. I really hated BYU after that game, and I'm never going to root for that team ever again because those guys are a bunch of punks. They were a bunch of punks, man. I was really upset about that. And I've been talking to some BYU fans recently who try to defend them. Like, nah, they're kind of shit starters.
They play dirty, which is fine. Like everyone plays kind of dirty, but like there was some stuff in there, like the shove to Carter in that game and stuff like that. Like that's not normal dirty in a basketball game. That's I'm going to cheap shot you. And it should have seriously been called for a technical. I was kind of or a flagrant. That annoyed the crap out of me that was not called for.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So let's touch on some of the guys that we've heard about, we've talked about. There's some guards, there's some wings. What we don't have on this list is big man yet, which is annoying to me. Let's get this done already. Now maybe they're targeting someone from currently in the tournament, but ultimately, the one thing that I think you're seeing already through this list, which we're going to get into, we're going to talk through some of these guys, is the ability to shoot. That's clearly something that they're not going to stop, right? Like that's a Kirk Penny thing. We have to be able to play 5 out. We've got to have the 5 3-point shooter. So I appreciate that. I just hope that we're a little bit better on the defensive side. The first guy we're going to talk about is a 6'7", 205 wing from Tarleton State, Boo Boo Benjamin. He clearly has the best name in this list. Boo Boo Benjamin is a great name. I would literally get a jersey that says Boo Boo on it. That's fantastic. That's what my daughter calls my dad, Boo Boo. It's hilarious. So, averaged 13.9 points a game last year at Tarleton State. Is obviously a nothing school. 4.6 rebounds, 1.7 assists. He shot the ball 38%. On volume, actually, at 4.4 threes a game. Pretty solid athlete. I don't know how it translates. What are your early thoughts on Boo Boo Benjamin?
Yeah, in the video I watched of him, I do have some questions about the athleticism translating for him to be a scorer at this level. I think he's a fine rotational piece, but I am a little concerned about his ability to not get kind of, back down or like pushed around at his size. He's not a super explosive guy. So looking at his game, I kind of see him as a guy who's going to struggle because he can't really elevate. And that's going to be problematic. I think he's a nice rotational piece. I don't know if he's a guy I want starting.
I agree with you on that. Yeah. Hey, look, we need some depth on this team. He probably would provide that. Now I will say, the very, very first time I ever saw anything from John Tanjay, I kind of thought the same thing. I'm being honest. I was like, rotational guy. I've been on record.
He was at Colorado State.
Well, that's fine. You're right. I mean, you're right. Better than this guy. But to be fair, Amos was the darling of the class for me last year. And clearly John Tonje was incredible. What the hell do we know?
I mean, from an athletic standpoint, Amos was the best athlete that they had coming in. His issues are more he's got to get a better feel for the game. And if he can get that, then the sky's the limit for Amos. Like, if he situationally understands when it's appropriate to shoot and where he needs to be on the court and gets a little bit better as a defender, he's got a lot of upside.
Yeah. A couple quick comments from the community here. Kevin says there's not enough room on the roster to bring in all the players we need to be competitive. There are 15 roster spots, and we have 13 players currently on the roster with incoming class. I think in the NIL era, Kevin, I think this is kind of a dead issue in the sense that they'll move one of them to a walk-on status and give them NIL money that covers their scholarship and call it a day.
And we don't know if people are going to be leaving. Like, there are guys who definitely could be headed out the door. Just because they haven't hit the portal yet does not mean that they won't.
Right. Yeah. There is some smoke about a couple other people potentially leaving. We don't have, hard evidence yet on that. We don't have exact names and stuff. We're not ready to share that, but there are some names that potentially could come out. That's another one for basketball. Tyler Schubert says, Frosh big from Illinois, Johnson. He'd be nice. Dude is thick. Morez Johnson from Illinois. He's one of those true rim protectors that he can't shoot the ball. Can he shoot the three? He might have a little bit of shot, but we desperately need to bring rim protection. We did lose out on Owen Freeman. Looks like he's going to Creighton. He was the Iowa transfer that we were talking about would be.
I'm sure he got really nice money.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Owen Freeman was worth a lot. Let's be honest. Like, everybody wanted Owen Freeman. And that guy was really, if we would have got him, it would have been absolutely crazy. Easton Park says, talk about Boyd. That is our next guy on the list. Nick Boyd, 6'3", $175, guard out of San Diego State, averaged 13.4 points, 4 assists, and 4 rebounds. Shot the ball 35% from 3. This guy probably is being looked at as the point guard so far. Now, again, I want to just be really clear. These are just names that we've read about, that we've heard about. This is not anything that's like, there's probably some offers out to these guys. We're not saying these are our guys, but we just want to talk through some potentials. So Nick Boyd, Justin, I like this guy. He's a point guard that we're going to need, someone who can actually handle the ball, pass the ball well. He's pretty athletic for his size as well.
He's got good jets. Like, he's probably the fastest guard we've had in quite a while. He is a little thinner. He's a guy you could probably use 10 pounds on him. But I think he has a chance to be effective. I like his game. I think he's a guy, he's got a lot more shiftiness to him with the ball than most of the point guards that we've had recently. So I actually really like him potentially as a player. I am a little worried about him getting beat up by the more physical guards in the conference, but he does make our perimeter defensive guys a lot quicker by having a guy like that on the perimeter.
Yeah. I think the perimeter, the defensive,
there's a big problem with this team.
It's a huge problem. I mean, and listen, San Diego State's a real school. It's a real program. This guy actually played in the Final Four, right? So he has tournament experience. There's a lot of pedigree there. I actually had his numbers up earlier. Yeah, effective field goal percentage 49%, which is pretty solid
for a point guard. Yes.
74% from the line, so not the greatest thing there. It does turn the ball over 1.8 times a game, but it's a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, which you always want to see from a point guard. That's a good thing to have. Even better is good. The other name we'll talk about here is, and then we're going to get to some potential bigs that I have a name I want to throw out to you and see your initial reaction. Alex Hubrecht. I'm probably not pronouncing that right. Alex Hubrecht. I actually had to look up on Google Translate how to say the name. But anyway, Wright State. So it's in the Horizon League. 6'3", 205 combo guard. Averaged 13.5 points a game, 3.1 assists, 3.1 rebounds. He is a three-point guy. He took 243 last year, made 90 of them, shot 38% on major volume, not just like a little bit. I mean, he shoots a heavy volume, 7.8 three-point attempts per game, which is a very, very high number. He, to me, fills the Max Klesmit role of he's a three-point specialist who hopefully has a better shooting year than Max Klesmit did here. My God. Remember when Max Klesmit was a three-point shooting specialist?
Wasn't he under 30% this year?
Yeah. He was not very good. But he does have the ability to score. He can move. He's not as athletic of a guard as you're going to see elsewhere. But no, he's just that guy that you bring out the bench that Wisconsin's had many years that can just shoot the ball. And he's going to be extremely focused on the three. Like I said, he takes a lot. He's not going to take that many with us. But yeah, Hubrex, what are some of your early thoughts?
Yeah, I think that this is a team that needs to keep spacing. So having another perimeter shooter is always a plus for them. Defensively, we'll see. Most of these guys I look at, and I'm not seeing a lot of guys that are going to be plus defenders, which always makes me a little concerned because
very good point.
As we've seen in this tournament, as the things have come down towards the end, the one thing you will notice, it gets real good defensively at the end of the towards the Elite Eight and Final Four. I mean, we saw today what Michigan State dealt with in Auburn, and that's what you deal with. Like Houston's another team that's like that, really athletic on the perimeter, can cause problems. That team would probably dice us up a little bit in terms of their ability to just be athletic on us. They need to get at least one guy has to be a plus athlete for this on the wing. And Blackwell's not that guy. So you're going to have to find somebody else who can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about that. I think that you're right about the fact that all Final Four teams are all doing that. Like, it's just, that's the difference. There was a comment earlier, I lost it. That someone said, like, watching the Final Four, we've got a long way to go. We do have a really, really long way to go. We were a good team this year, but we didn't have Final Four type talent because, my God, like Florida, Auburn, Houston, Duke, they 4 number 1 seeds, by the way, for the first time since 2008 are in the Final Four, which is crazy. Last time it was in San Antonio, not the last time, but it was in San Antonio when it happened again. I'm shocked when I see all 4 number 1 seeds, but the difference is they're extremely long, athletic defenders who are really good at scoring the ball too, which is good. I'm seeing a couple of comments here about some Indiana and Illinois guys in the chat. I wanted to kind of touch on that. Renault. So by the way, Indiana lost pretty much their entire roster. Like, their entire roster is in the portal or graduated or something. Also, guys from Illinois have been talked about. Trey White is in the transfer portal. He has, I think, 1 year left of eligibility. He is a 6'7", 210-pound wing. Obviously, Morez Johnson, we already touched on him. Look, Illinois had some pretty good players last year, and if we end up looking closer at this guy, we'll bring on our Illinois friend to talk a little bit about them. But yeah, I mean, Trey White averaged 10.5 points a game last year. He shot the ball pretty well, 50% overall field goal percentage, which is pretty solid. But Renault is a guy from Indiana that I like. It'd be good to get some Big Ten guys or some guys with more higher level experience. What you notice from the guys we've talked about so far, and the guy we're going to talk about next, they come from small schools. All of them do. Now, like, you can pick out diamonds in the rough, which I think is what he's trying to do, right? He doesn't want to have to give a ton of NIL money to these guys. So we're trying to find diamonds. Some are going to hit, some are not. But it would be nice to get a little bit of experience from higher level schools. Now, Nick Boyd from San Diego State, that's a solid pickup. But otherwise, we really need some more experience, right? I mean, how do you feel about just going after the mid-major guys?
I think there's always guys in the mid-majors that potentially develop and become players. Like, every year we see guys in the NCAA tournament that are playing on these teams that you look at and you're like, how is a guy like this playing on this team? And you have no idea why they slip through the cracks. And a lot of the times it's just they're super raw. And sometimes it takes guys a little longer to click, or maybe they played at a school that just didn't have good coaching and they have an opportunity to finally, once they get to college, show some of that ability and develop. Everyone, like anyone who's played high school basketball, has seen a guy that they look at and they're like, why is this guy not playing somewhere in college? Like, I played against guys that were like that. They're out there to be found, but finding guys who will put the work in to get to develop that, if it is a struggle, there aren't necessarily a ton of them out there. Like, the hyper athletic guys either are going to never click, most likely, or it's going to be a late bloomer type that's going to be a couple years into college already before it happens. Now you have a much better chance of getting them now than you did in the past. Those are guys that would have stayed 4 years, probably at a mid-major or whatever in the past. And now you're going to get an opportunity because the transfer portal is so prevalent.
Right. Comments here from the community. Steve Kneebone, Big Ten guys are going to cost more. There's no doubt about that. Bo Dragon, they have to get a center and a 3. And then a comment here from Tyler Schubert, which I liked. What UW showed this past year, that has to make our program more appealing to transfers than in the years past, right? Gard needs to leverage Tanjay's performance this year to keep the momentum going. Look, I think had we made a Sweet 16, it makes it a little more appealing. I think the fact that we're struggling to get past the round of 32 is a problem. Ultimately, though, I think we're in the world of money talks, and we're going to need to put those numbers up, which is why I think had the Sweet 16 run would have brought more money in. That would have been a helpful number for the NIL and additional revenue for the team in general. So it's going to be difficult to not have that. But I do think Tyler's right. Like, we should be able to get solid. When you see a guy go from, Colorado State, Missouri to second team All-American, definitely going to get drafted, I feel like that's going to be something that people are going to look at, right? I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I think you need to look at this from the standpoint of now that here's whether people want to admit it or not, Wisconsin's offense in the past was used to recruit against them. And that was even with Gard being here. People would be like, do you really want to play in an offense like that with how rigid it is and how limited it's going to be for you? You're going to have to hold on to the ball for however long. And that's changed, but it needs to change like it was this last year. Now, if we're consistently playing at this type of pace and scoring at this level, I think the recruiting will uptick. And to what level, I have no idea. But the guys that we've been missing on that we look at that were like, he went there instead of here. Like there's been some guys we've watched go on to other teams that it's like, really? They chose them over us? And it was largely because of the style of play. Wisconsin is creating an environment where maybe some of those battles where they've lost to guys, you have a better chance of bringing them in. Now, you have to continue to do this. I'm not saying you have to get deep tourney runs to get more NIL, but if you have more seasons like this where you're winning 26, 27 games, you're going to have a better shot at getting people to want to invest to get you over the hump than when you're winning 20 and losing 14 and people are looking at it like, this team just wasn't very good for stretches this season. Why am I going to fork out a bunch of money?
It's fun basketball to watch. Like, I think we can all agree that this year was one of the more fun seasons to watch. Obviously, we're good. 3 seed is one of the higher seeds we've had in the NCAA tournament. But I do think that success obviously is going to help everything out. There's no doubt about that. One other guy we wanted to touch on that's been sort of linked, and anyone else, by the way, that you guys are thinking of, put in the comments if there's anyone that you want us to touch on, or someone else that you think might, or that you've heard about might be looking to transfer in. Keontae Jones, 6'6", 175-pound wing out of Cal State Northridge. Averaged 13.1 points a game, 9 rebounds, by the way. Led his conference with 9 rebounds, and can shoot the ball. He technically shot the ball 38% from 3, but he only took 1 a game. So, I mean, he took some very, very low volume, but overall his effective field goal percentage was 52%. He's a pretty good athlete, Justin, this Keontae Jones kid.
Bouncy guy on the wing. This is the type of guy we're talking about to get that type of athlete on the perimeter. He's got to put weight on. He's a guy who probably needs to get to 200 pounds if he wants to play in the Big Ten. Yeah, that would be at a minimum. But he's undersized right now for the Big Ten, but explosive. He's a really bouncy guy. Moves well. He's fluid. We don't have a guy like that on the roster right now. Like, he's a better athlete than probably anyone we currently have out there. So it would be huge to get a guy like this, even if he's not a starter. I'm guessing you're probably wanting to bring him in as a starter, but this is the type of guy you need on the edge that could potentially just be disruptive. And especially if he's a plus defender. I don't know whether he is or not. I haven't seen enough from him, but he could be a nice pickup.
What I love about someone like this is the ability to get good rebounds, tough rebounds, right? It's not just being in position to get rebounds. Now he's rebounding at Cal State Northridge. I understand that. But if you watch the guy, he is very athletic. And he's one of those guys that you saw it a little bit from Amos this year. You saw it a little bit from even Carter Gilmore. They made really athletic rebounds to make big plays, rebounds that they're not normally going to get unless they make an extremely good, strong, aggressive athletic play. That's what this guy I think can bring. So the number one thing for me is we obviously need to rebound better. Not like we were a poor rebounding team, but our situational rebounding was very bad. It seems like every time we needed to get a rebound, we couldn't.
Oh yeah.
And that's when you're lacking an athletic rebounder, that's what tends to happen, because the other team is really pushing in those key moments, and we struggled at times. Carter Gilmore almost lost the craziest rebound all season at the end of that stupid BYU game, but whatever. We don't talk about BYU. That's just no fun. Cheesehead Bucky says Jones is an A+ defender, also a Madison kid. He is a Madison kid. Sorry, I meant to mention that. There are, by the way, some of the names we listed here are Wisconsin guys, which I like to see. Right, we're bringing back Wisconsin guys. I haven't seen enough from him defensively. And the other thing is translating Cal State Northridge opponents to Big Ten opponents is very different from a defensive standpoint, because you're going up against guys that are far more athletic than you are. We are gonna touch on basketball. Football very soon. Go through the coaches and talk about that. But one more thing on basketball, Justin. Let's quickly just kind of touch on the lineup a little bit. So assuming we don't lose anybody else, right? I mean, we probably will, but assuming we don't, just for the sake of discussion, Blackwell and Winter obviously automatically slot in. Do you feel like Amos is a starter at the 4 and Winter's a 5, or do you feel like you need to get starters in this group? Like, whoever, are we transferring in starter needs, or do you feel like how many transfers do you feel like need to be in the starting lineup, and who on our current team can be in the starting lineup?
I personally think that right now, you want Winter to stay at the 4. I just don't think that he's physical enough, or quite honestly has the strength to play the center position. And I think he moves well enough that you want him to play the 4. You can kind of hide somebody who is a little more limited athlete, but is a more kind of a brute at center. You can't do that at power forward. Amos, if that's the case, he might be one of the guys we see leave. Like, I have a hard time believing that he's going to stick around if he's not going to be a guy who's going to play big minutes. And maybe they tell him, hey, you can be a super sub. We're expecting you to be a guy who's going to give us 20+ minutes.
I mean, he could take Carter Gilmore's minutes.
Yeah. He very well could be that. That could be the role, but maybe he envisions himself as having more of a role with somebody else. It's going to be hard to see with him, but he looked like he was making progress as the season went on.
I agree with you that Winter has to start at the 4. I think his ceiling is higher. Dominic says Nolan's ceiling is way higher than at the 4 than at 5. Yeah, I completely agree with you there. It's hard to look at the lineup and think we really need that many, because when you need that many starters to come from the transfer portal, that's not really a good thing. Like last year, we didn't really need that. Tanjay obviously was, but we knew we needed 1. You could almost argue that you need 2 or 3, truthfully. I mean, you really definitely need 2. You got to have a point guard. You have to. I don't think Janicki's ready to start. I don't think Freetag's ready to start. Yeah. I don't know. Janicki likely has the highest that could be. He could be the starter at 1, but I don't like that.
Well, Freetag definitely. A guy like Robeson make a big jump too.
Robeson, yeah. I mean, he's probably he's 3-4 kind of guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe if he takes a jump, that'd be really helpful, because we could use that. Obviously, Kinzinger as well, are one of our guys that are coming in. So there's a guy that could potentially start at the 1. I
think he's going to be in the rotation, but I think there's some limitations with him too. He athletically, this is why you need a guy like Boyd, because I don't know who is, like, of those 2 guys, Boyd is going to be much better at getting downhill and getting to the rim than Kinzinger is. Like, I have concerns about his ability at the rim to score in the college game, because I just don't know if he's explosive enough. Now, that doesn't mean he won't be crafty enough to get himself there. It just means I don't think he's explosive enough to get up and be able to score with contact at the rim.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if Boyd comes in and starting at the point, that's fine, right? That's okay. So if Boyd came in and started at the point, I think you're definitely going to need a 5. I 100% agree. Greppy, no, sorry.
If you can get 10 minutes from him this next year, you're happy. I don't know if he's going to.
And some bloody rim protection would be good from Greppy, but otherwise, stop. It's not there. Yeah, Easton Park says Kinzinger's brother is a target to transfer. Yeah, this is another one that we've talked about.
He's not officially in the portal though right now.
He's not. I'm not sure, truthfully. I don't know if he's in the portal or not, but I have heard his name a little bit. I think Ryan's talked about him a little bit too. So there are a lot of options out there. But the fact that you're going to legitimately need a point and a 5 to start, and maybe even a 3-2, like yikes. This is going to be a long offseason for Greg Gard. Long offseason.
Ryan, Greppy is a year away from being a year away. That seems fair.
Yeah, I mean, that is fair. That is fair. You know what? I really hope. Okay, so of the players, Justin, I'm sorry, we're gonna move on to football after this, I promise. But of the players that are coming back, not Blackwell and Winter, outside of that, who do you think could take the biggest step and like really surprise us? Because like, you know, they Winter and Blackwell both did that. They need to take steps again. Who's next for you? Who's going to come out and be like, yeah, he took a big jump?
I mean, it has to be Amos, right? Like,
could it be Janicki? Could we be really surprised with Janicki?
I think he could take a step, but I don't know if he's going to be more than like a 6 or 7 point per game guy this next year. I think that asking for more than that's going to be a lot, but that's a big bump. Like he is 1.9 this year. So for him, just more consistency with shooting would be big, and just kind of minimizing some of the mistakes that we saw. He's a guy who has a good feel for the game, but sometimes he lets himself get a little out of control. And that's one of those things where I think he'll be a lot better with one more year.
The one that I think you mentioned him earlier, Robeson, that'd be an interesting one. If Robeson was able to take a jump, that would be really good because he's a guy that you need it. Easton Park says, I'm rooting for Freitag to take a jump. He's got great attitude. Just haven't seen anything from him. Yeah, look, Freitag is one of those guys that we have to see it next year. We have no choice. Like we all thought he was going to be in the rotation this year, and he wasn't. And when he was out there, he didn't really look that ready. So, you know, it's a little bit of a difficult situation. All right. Football. We're going on to football now. Justin texted me earlier and said, I want to talk about football. Here I am taking 30 minutes to talk about basketball. Sorry about that. So, all right. So we're obviously, look, we're looking towards the 2025 season now. So we're going to kind of do snippets here and there. We're going to talk coaching staff today and answer the question about whether this staff is really good enough and what their positives and negatives are, right? We're going to go by position group. We'll start on offense, Justin, because we've got a lot of coaches on offense to talk through. Jeff Grimes, of course, the newest member of this team. We will talk about the coordinators. I know everyone's really ready for Justin to talk about Mike Tressel, which we will talk about Mike Tressel. But let's just start with Grimes and then go down from there offensively. Your overall takes, how do you want to do this? You want to do grades with these guys? Kind of what are you thinking?
I think we'll just discuss them from the standpoint. I don't want to put grades on it, but I'm not going to mince words with certain coaches.
Let's start with Grimes. Where to start there?
I personally think he has a chance to be a revelation here. He has a chance to be what Christ was as an offensive coordinator for Wisconsin back in the Bielema days. I think I truly feel he has that type of ability to him in terms of how he could change our offensive system. I think there's a lot to like in terms of the way he does things. Like I said, there's a lot that I watched with him that it's like it reminded me of things that the Packers do. And every time I watch the Packers, it's like, what the heck is going on here? Like you're seeing things that you just don't normally see in games. And some of that creativity is really going to, I feel like, change things. And one of the biggest things for the Badgers now, they are a team that is not going to be the hunted anymore. So they're not going to necessarily get everyone's full attention like they have in the past because Wisconsin's not good now.
That's
so
sad.
maybe teams kind of look at them and give them like, yeah, we'll win this. And they're going to get caught. Like Grimes it's a difficult offense to deal with. If you're a defense that isn't fully invested in what you're watching, you're going to get your eyes caught on stuff that's going to end up hurting you. And I saw it with Kansas. Like if Daniels was played to the level he had a year earlier before he got hurt, like they would have carved up. They would have been another 9-win team last year. Like they were absolutely good enough to just carve teams up offensively if Daniels wasn't so rough. And he was terrible to start the season. At the end of the season, they took down 3 ranked teams. Like, we would kill to have that here. Like, could you imagine what would happen in this season if somehow we beat 3 ranked teams? We would lose our minds.
Again, sad because, geez, Bo Dragon says good enough for what? My question about being good enough. What I meant by that is, are these coaches on the staff good enough for Luke Fickell to really hit his ceiling, like at Wisconsin, like to be back on top? And I think Jeff Grimes could be that guy that could say, like, you know, and maybe not ceiling, but we're talking upper echelon conference, talking 9-10 wins, like that where Wisconsin belongs, high, super high floor at least. So that's kind of where we were approaching it. As far as what you said on Grimes, I completely agree. I think that he's a guy that what I want to see from him this year is that inventiveness, the multiplicity that he's talked about when he showed up on offense, and do something with Edwards, because we've had a couple bad seasons with our quarterbacks. We need that to change immediately.
Easton Park saying Daniels is a different athlete, though. Yeah, I won't necessarily disagree that he offers some mobility, but I don't think he's such a different athlete that you can't make up for him in certain ways. I would say Edwards is a better passer. Like, he's more consistently on point than what we saw from Daniels last year. Daniels was really rough. Now he's a plus runner, which is a massive upside that Wisconsin doesn't have. Beyond anyone potentially, I would say, I don't even know if I'd put Carter Smith in that category, which I really like him as a runner. The closest guy you're probably looking at that would be the kid from Maitre D. That's if they get him this year, Hopkins. Hopkins is a plus runner. Like, that kid can fly. If you get him in this offense they like to run speed option. One of the plays that I loved in this offense, and I don't know if we'll do this, but I'm praying that we do, it gets an over-aggressive defense and it absolutely annihilates them if you have a decent offensive line. They'd run the speed option reverse. So you have 2 guys running one way, and then all of a sudden the wide receiver comes cutting back the other way, and he's at full bore. You hit the timing right on that. The Kansas play, I watched them run it. They had mistimed the transition. Otherwise, the other side of the field was wide open, and they had a guy running back to the opposite side. It's like, that's the type of stuff that Grimes does that teams don't do and is really hard to prepare for. Because if you don't bite on it, they can just keep it and run the speed option, and you get burned for 10 yards with that. Or you bite hard on it and try to stop the speed option, get caught in the back, caught over pursuing, and end up potentially giving up a touchdown. Like,
when Jaden Ballard or Tretch Kekahuna take that ball and go nuts.
Yeah, you handed off the Ballard on that, and good God.
That's what I'm saying, dude.
Goodbye.
Yeah, no, I mean, Grimes has a lot of upside there for sure. And I think we're all excited about him. Let's move on to the O-line. Blazek, another guy that we like, before we get into some other guys that maybe there's some questions on. Blazek, your thoughts and what are your expectations this year for him?
I think it's going to be a huge year for him, being in that room for 2 consecutive years. I think we're going to see a lot of progression from the guys who are here already. And I think that the young guys who have talent are so athletic that I think that we're going to see a bump this year, I think, overall from the offensive line. I just think that you're slotting in 2 guys that are plus athletes at positions in Haywood and potentially Mandel on the offensive line. And I think that that's going to be a problem, because those guys are not going to be overwhelmed from a physicality standpoint. They're both freaks of nature from a strength standpoint. And they're so athletic that even if they're not perfect technique wise, they could probably get away with the fact that they're just athletic enough to compensate. So I think the offensive line is going to be improved this year.
And he's done a really good job. I don't have no issues with his recruiting whatsoever. Perfectly content.
He's the best recruiter on the staff.
Yeah, I mean, well, we did just lose that guy to Minnesota, Gavin Meyer, going to stay to take a picture with PJ.
How many 4-stars has he cleaned up in the last 2 cycles?
Yeah,
the offensive line, like, there's numerous that should have been. Like, he probably should have like 7 or 8 4-stars already.
It's fair. Look, and Tyler Schieber just brought it up. Can you touch on us losing to the 3-star O-lineman from Janesville? That's Gavin Meyer. We're so loaded from the last 2 classes. I don't think it matters too much, but I hate losing in-state kids. I agree. I don't like losing in-state kids because I think that it's important. What I would say is, number one, we're not done recruiting him. Okay. Like we saw that last year with the defensive lineman. The name escapes me, that went back and forth. But I mean, it's
Hadaway.
Yeah, Petaway. I think it's fine. Like, ultimately, we need our room to be in good shape, whether we have the in-state talent or not, right? If our room was in bad shape, and we weren't getting our in-state guys, that's different. I think everyone's fine with the room that we have right now, and everyone's fine with the talent that we just brought in with the last class and what we're bringing with the next class. So the fact that if we're losing a guy to Minnesota, maybe it's because that we don't like him as much. And there's that too. Like, at the bottom line is, you can't always just have the in-state guys. You got to have the right guys to fit the system. And I trust AJ Blazik, and I think that's the point of what we're saying. Like, the offensive line is not something that concerns me. Right? It did concern me before. It doesn't really concern me anymore. And that's a nice place to be.
So I'm just going to dive into this real quick, and here's my perspective on this. Why do we want kids that are from Wisconsin? We want kids that are from Wisconsin because they bleed the red and white. We want guys who absolutely will die for the team because they grew up in this state. Well, based on the comments the kid made, that's not the way he felt. So does getting him really matter if he's not a guy who's willing to, live and die for the team? Because that is not a kid that you necessarily has the attitude that you're looking for. Because, like, the plus side that you're looking for from the Wisconsin kids is you want them to be plus culture guys. And his attitude isn't that type of attitude. Like, the other part of this that I look at is, yes, we've absolutely killed it the last 2 cycles with what we've done in that room. I will not say that I don't like him as a player, because I do think that he has a lot of potential. But I would not put him above probably anyone. He's on the same level that I would have put Cam Clark this last cycle, which is he's very raw. There's some nice athletic tools, but of the tackle prospects that we've brought in the last 2 cycles, he's probably the least athletic out of that group, because they have some guys who are really light on their feet. And I felt that Meyer was a little bit more of a plotter with his feet. He's heavy-footed, but he's super physical, so he makes up for it by being a guy who just overwhelms people. I want the guys who are light on their feet, because if you can if they have some physicality to them, you can't teach that level of ability to maneuver and laterally and be able to play with guys. The other part of it is most of the guys we brought in have played at higher level football. Like, they've played against more quality talent, and there's less guess with them. Wisconsin is so hard. Like, you could have a guy who's a 6'7" tackle who's 320 pounds, who's going against 200-pound defensive ends. Like, he's getting nothing from that. It's like him playing against a peewee player. So while I like Meyer as a recruit, he's not a kid that I was afraid to lose. Now, the other part of this, I will say, if you're a kid who bleeds Badger colors, there isn't a chance in hell you go to Minnesota if you truly are a Badger fan, because I've been a Badger fan my whole life. I despise that school. And PJ Fleck is probably the coach I hate more than anybody in college football.
100%.
So the idea of if I was a recruit and I was in this state, and this is just my mentality, if that guy called me, I wouldn't even take the call. Like, if my school in high school, if he called the, coaches call down, I would just be like, no, I don't want to talk to him. Tell him I'm not interested. And that would have been the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, look, that picture of him standing next to PJ Fleck, I'm like, oh, it's fine. Now, to be fair, I understand people are going to say, well, you're not bothered by losing him because you lost him already. Fair point. But when there's someone in state that we feel like we miss on, like, for example, Sexton, that's someone that we're upset about. We were really upset we lost him at Penn State. There are guys.
Meyer could turn into a good player. I'm saying that from the standpoint of how stocked that room is, he's kind of buried right now. And anyone from this cycle, I'm just being honest with you, unless they get top of the board guys who are legitimate, like, top shelf players, it's going to be hard to get into this room now. Because when I look at these guys, I don't care what their rating is. I'm looking at them based off of the film and their athleticism. I was high on Mandel before he got the boost. I don't even think he was a 4-star when I originally started looking at him. And I said, this kid's a freak. Like, he moves so fluidly, and his physicality with how light he was on his feet was incredible. They have had a couple of guys these last 2 cycles that I look at him like, this guy's going to be a pro. Like, unless there's injuries that happen, the physical tools are so high level that their offensive line is going to be stacked in a couple of years.
And that's ultimately the thing, right? We're happy with AJ Blazik because the line's there. And if we lose guys like Evan Meyer, okay, well, we've got everyone else that's coming in the room. Let's move on, Justin, to QB. Kenny Guyton is the coach of the QBs. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the grade I give on him is we know he's got a good personality and that the players really like him. I think he's a plus recruiter. If we look at who we've gotten in on at quarterback already, listen, I'm going to be honest. I think that he's the guy doing the bulk of the heavy lifting with the quarterback recruiting. I think Guyton is a plus for that. We will see how he is as a teacher and how we see from a developmental standpoint, because that is what he's going to be most tasked with, is being the guy to kind of work on the little things with these quarterbacks. Grimes is more of a big picture guy in terms of the offense as a whole. The little things like technique work and stuff like that and reads and everything like that, I'm sure Grimes is taking a role in it, but I'm sure the day-to-day on that is all going to trickle down to Guyton. And I actually think that you have a guy in there who has done the job is going to have a higher level understanding than what you expect. I think there is opportunity for him to be a very good quarterback coach once he gets some reps under him. I think this year may be a little bit of a learning experience for him. But I also look at him as like, if Grimes ever does move on, he's been a guy who's bounced around every 2 to 3 years. This is probably a position that you potentially look at Guyton in 2 or 3 years as the guy who replaces him. And that's what he's being groomed for long term. I
mean, maybe for me, Guyton, the jury's a little out on Guyton. Let's be honest.
He's got to prove it. I don't know if he's that level now, but I think that there's potential with him.
When Guyton got that job, it was fun. It was underwhelming for Badger fans. I mean, it was like, it's just,
I wasn't underwhelmed by it. Like,
I mean,
there was nobody that I looked at that I'm like, this guy is looking at QB coaches is so hard because number one, that you kind of want a guy who's got a similar level of like understanding of what you like to do with your quarterback, like footwork and everything like that is really important. And because that's the guy who's going to be working with them on that stuff. But that's also a position that is like the progression, following the progression for coaches that become OCs.
Yeah, which, listen, if that's the future for him, that's great. I don't necessarily see it here, but he played the position. Fair. I'm happy that he's doing it. You're right about being a plus recruiter. Carter Smith was a big get. Like, I'm perfectly happy with that. Let's see. We need vastly improved quarterback play this year. Vastly improved quarterback play. He needs to provide that. We've got Billy Edwards now. Let's see a year where we actually have good quarterback play and we've got a good OC. All right. Devin Spalding, running backs go. Yeah, sorry, you have a comment you want to put up
Tyler Schreiber, did he play at Ohio State? I believe he played like 6 or 7 games when who was the quarterback that got injured?
He did the wide receiver.
The one that turned into the wide receiver. Yeah, he played like half a season as a starter when the starter went down. But yeah, he was mostly a backup. He was never the definite starter.
So Devin Spalding.
Braxton Miller, yeah. Devin Spalding. This one will be really interesting. It's the one position I look at almost exclusively from a can this guy recruit standpoint. People have really hammered him, and I don't know if it's as warranted. I don't feel strongly about him one way or another. I think it's a really big cycle for him in terms of locking down an important recruit. If he gets Latimer this cycle, I'm going to be really impressed with him, because Latimer, to me, like I said, I compared him to a guy like he's got a little Nick Chubb to him. I'm like, Wisconsin doesn't typically get guys who are this level of physical at running back. Like, those are guys that go to Georgia or Ohio State. Wisconsin doesn't typically get a chance. I feel like he's a little underrated right now, and he has a chance. He's a guy who might climb, but the film is really impressive on him. But he is a guy that if this cycle does not go well for him, I will be on I think it's time to make a change there, because he has to hit on some good backs this cycle.
So that's clearly what you're looking for from him. You feel like he needs to hit. That's fair. I don't disagree. I don't know if I feel as strongly about that, because I think that he's done a pretty good job so far. And I think that the room, ultimately, when I look at these assistant coaches and their roster construction, it's all about the room in general. And I'm happy with the way the room looks, because I think he played a part in keeping Giacomelli, like, who's a guy that absolutely could have left. There's no reason for him to have really stayed. So we've got a solid room now. Obviously, we know about the class that came in last year with Dupree and Jones, and that's going to be great. We have Yakimelli there. Tuca, there is some depth in that room, but you're right. He does need to keep going. I don't know that he needs a guy like Latimer to keep me on his side. I just want that room to be productive.
Yeah, my point is more he has to recruit at a high level because that's a position. Number one, it's the focal point of the offense, and number two, you need to get high level players in there because it makes a huge difference for this offense if you can. And Latimer to me is a difference maker type back. Like it's like another Dupree and Jones type back getting added to that room, which would be absolutely huge.
So far for me, Grimes, check mark, happy with that so far. Blazic, check mark. Kenny Guyton, I'm a little bit concerned about Guyton. Spalding, I'm actually okay with. So I feel like that's kind of where I'm at.
You got the incomplete on Guyton.
Guyton just I wasn't super thrilled about that hire, but nonetheless. All right. Tight ends, Nate Letton and Joe Ludwig. We've got an assistant tight end coach there. How you feeling about the tight end coaching?
I actually felt like he's recruited at a fairly high level. We lost obviously one that retired medically. What's his name? The kid from in-state. But you have Steck, who he locked down as a 4-star tight end. I really liked Nyzie Davis last cycle as a tight end. And who was it? Bork, the other one? Yeah, Booker was the one that medically retired. And then Bork is the other one that came in. So I think he's done a pretty nice job with the tight end room. Now we need some of these guys to start showing up on the field, which I understand people getting frustrated with this. Tight end is not typically a position where guys go out there and start racking up tons of catches unless it's a focal point of the offense. That was absolutely not what was being done with Longo. So I think we just don't know what that room really is until they start pushing that room to actually produce, which this year I think we will. Kozel is going to get used a ton. And he'll probably suddenly people will be like, oh, Nate Letton, nice work. I think he's going to get another high-end recruit this cycle. He may end up getting another 4-star tight end. And if he does that, great. I feel like they have some really good athletes in that room, and there's a chance for that to be a positive going forward.
Yeah, completely agree. Nate Lennon, listen, any guy who can bring in Tanner Koziol and have that guy transfer in with 94 catches, perfectly fine with me. I agree. It's a room that we haven't seen a lot of production from. Tucker Ashcraft simply wasn't the guy that was going to be really good enough, but now we bring in some more guys. You're right. The Nyzie Davis pickup was big. Thought we were going to lose him for a little bit. So that's a nice one. But ultimately the room needs to be more productive. Grimes demands that from the tight ends. The way he runs his offense, we're going to have production from there. I think he's a guy that he is good enough for me. This guy is perfectly fine, and I'm happy with him. Last guy on offense before we move to defense, where I think we're going to have a lot of interesting discussion, is Jordan Reed at wide receiver. Your thoughts?
It's going to be a bit before we really know what we have here. He's stepping up to a higher caliber level. I will say this. I'm really impressed with the kids he's got lined up coming in for official visits. If this is the type of talent we can expect him to be bringing in cycle to cycle, I think we may see some of the most talented wide receiver rooms that we've had at Wisconsin. It looks like he's stepped it up a notch from where we've been. The guy Pettit, the kid he's got coming in, that's an SEC kid, in my opinion. Just looking at him as an athlete, the fluidity and the size and the physicality and ability to move, Wisconsin doesn't get kids like that. I know somebody brought up who was the kid we had a few years back? Went to Detroit in the draft. Wide receiver. Why can't I think of him?
No, I can't even think of
this. I'm totally broken. But my point is that they compared him to him, and he ran like a 4.7. Cephas, yes. And Cephas ran like almost a 4.7. This kid probably runs a 4.5, and he's 6'4". So that's where the difference is between him and Cephas, is you have a guy who can actually is fast enough that his size plays up because he's got that ability to high point with that type of size and fluidity. And you don't really have a way to compensate against that. Cephas, you somewhat at least can stay with him, and he had to physically kind of move you around. That's a guy who can create separation just because he actually has a little juice to him too in terms of speed. So I think that he's getting some really interesting players in here. Washington is also another guy. So some of these guys I look at, it's really hard to know how many of them are his, because some of them we were on before he was actually hired. But I really do like the guys they have coming in. He's known as a really good recruiter. So if he can develop, which he did a pretty good job at Western Michigan, if he can continue that here, and these guys if he can get bodies in there that have some Big Ten level skills, we could see an uptick in terms of what we have for talent at that position, which would be huge for Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think in general, I agree with you in principle. I think offensively in general, I'm not really I'm not displeased with anything that we have on the coaching staff. Zach Bart's offense there finally seems to be vision. Results TBD, but it feels like the pieces, scheme, and identity are there that weren't necessarily there with Longo. Hopefully the pieces on defense help out. Good transition into defense. We'll start at the top. Mike Tressel, a lot of questions. A lot of people think one way. A lot of people think another way. You've been on record as saying many times that you don't really like this guy, but there are times when you're sort of willing to give him another chance. Let's start at the top. How are you feling about him? Is he the guy that can take us?
To me, he's on his last chance is where I'm at with him right now. I was really unimpressed with him last year. I feel like part of the reason why we struggled as a team was how poorly we played on defense at times really did not help out the offense. The lack of ability to create disruption on the defensive side meant that we typically were starting with bad field position. Like we would end up with the ball at the 20, and it was like, well, you're going to have to march at 80 yards. How many quick change situations do we have last year where we got the ball on the opposite side of the 50 and had a chance to score? I don't know. Did we have more than like 2 the entire season? We didn't create turnovers. We didn't create negative plays. We made it far too easy for teams to get themselves into plus positions to be able to make plays when they needed to. And we talk about those games like Oregon and Penn State, that it's like we were really in those games, and look at it. And it's like, yes, but the problem is that when we needed to force something negative on defense in those games to like put ourselves into a good place to win them, we couldn't do it. We let them kind of just continue to grind. Like, I guess the best way I could explain this is this. If those teams could use all 4 downs like they had to at the end of the game to go down and get a winning score, do any of us feel like they would have had a chance to stop either one of those teams? I don't.
No.
They had a hard enough time stopping 3 downs. Like if you give another team, those teams an extra down, they're absolutely going to just figure out a way to move down the field and score. And that can't be the way this team plays, because you're never going to win a big game when we need to. And that's what if the offense this year drops 30 points on Alabama or Oregon or somebody like that. They get rolling. Do we feel like the defense can stop that? Because I don't know. Like last year's defense couldn't. This year's defense has to find a way to be able to do that. They need to be at least competitive. And I felt like at times we were almost being played with on the defensive side of the ball, where teams were just like disinterested in not wanting to attack us quite full on because they knew our offense was inept. So it was like, we don't need to chant. We can, when we need to score, we can. Like when we need to get aggressive, let's not take the risks.
Yeah. I mean, from a personnel standpoint, we made enough changes that we should be different defensively, but we'll see if that actually translates. B-Vault says, I'm always late. B-Vault, better late than never. That's okay. Check out we always post on Twitter, by the way, what time we're going to go live a few hours before. Easton Park says he held Oregon to what, 16? Yeah. But we gave up 42 to Iowa and 44 to Nebraska. So the defense was just poor, very, very poor.
Couldn't stop Minnesota whenever we needed to.
I mean, that Iowa game just told me everything I need to know about the defense and our fact that we had to make changes up front, and we did. We have many defensive linemen over 300 pounds, which is good. But obviously, there's an issue there that Mike Tressel needs to solve, and I agree it's his last chance. Who someone on his staff might not be his last chance, because we have seen a little bit of growth there. But again, it was the issue last year. It was the problem. EJ Whitlow, he's made some improvements personnel-wise, recruiting-wise. Do you feel like he actually has enough on field to actually make the defensive line work?
Last year, absolutely did not. I think this year, I actually think he's a really good coach. I think there is an opportunity for him to start proving himself, because I think when you look at some of these coaches, you have to look at what their pedigree is coming in. He's not a guy that's done it at a major conference team, but he's a guy who's been very well respected at the other places that he's coached and has done an incredible job of putting together all conference types at his last few stops. So I think that if you give him the pieces, he'll be fine. He'll hit the ground running. He'll go. The big thing with him will be interesting to see what level he can recruit at. Because if he can get it done, if he can get us in the composite range, that 88 to 90 range that I always like to talk about, maybe jump over 90 a few times, Wisconsin is going to be in a good place. But he's got to get us there. He's got to start to fill up that room with guys who are, maybe you're not getting the top shelf guys, but you're getting the guys that are rung down that maybe just require a little bit more development. And you can put together a really, really kind of feisty, nasty defensive line. I think he's capable of doing that.
Yeah, I'm definitely in a bit of a wait and see mode with EJ Whitlow. At the end of the day, this was the weakest point of our defense last year. We frankly got pushed around a lot by not so great teams, and then better teams just destroyed us.
Yeah.
And let's see the player development. Let me see what Dylan Johnson looks like now. Like, have we developed him? Is he taking a step? Like, we got the recruits, fine, but I need to see some production from EJ Whitlow. I do believe in him. I'm with you that better situation than the last guy. I think we're okay. But Wisconsin football cannot be pushed around on the defensive line. I am over that. I'm over seeing Minnesota push our defensive guys around like rag dolls.
How much do you put on him for that, or do you put that on strength and conditioning?
It's tough. I think I put it on talent first and foremost because we didn't have the guys last year.
His room was terrible.
But now with Peterson and Perkins, like the room is better. It's not saying it's great because we don't know if those guys will translate. But I'm sorry, it has to be. You cannot. We are Wisconsin.
He needs to at least be average.
You cannot have a line that gets pushed around. We're definitely not going to play with two down linemen this year. We're definitely going to have an increase on that. I think we've seen that in spring a little bit too. But I need to see it because this is certainly an area that I'm not happy with overall. But let's go on to someone that I think you're going to have some things to say about. Matt Mitchell. Outside linebacker, special teams, and Tuff Borland also coaches linebackers as well, morely on the inside, I think. But Matt Mitchell, what are your thoughts?
He's in the same place as Tressel for me. Last year was horrific from the defensive side of the football. The edges were non-existent. Like, I think they combined for like 4 sacks or something like that from that group, and maybe like 6 total overall across, because like you had 2 for Peterson, I think Cheeks had like 2.5, and then there was like 1 from one of the other 2 or 3 guys there. So the room was bad. It was like we're used to getting that type of production from one guy on our defensive line or on the edge guys. So quite honestly, I didn't see enough let's try something different out of those guys. I am concerned that certain guys aren't going to be given the opportunity. And there's players, I'm really curious to see how we implement a lot of this, because that route, like seeing the roster list outside linebackers and then basically showing defensive ends under that group. It's like, what are we doing here? Some of these guys aren't outside linebackers. They're a 3-4 defensive end that is masquerading as an edge. Like, you might as well just call them edges instead of outside linebackers. But I worry about a guy like Clayton potentially getting run. Like, he's a gazelle on the edge. He might be the best pass rusher we have on the team right now as a incoming freshman. Do you want to put him out there against the run? Heck no. I don't want him anywhere near that. But if it's 3rd and 8, do I like the idea of sending him off the edge like a missile? Absolutely. We saw him wreck guys who were 5 stars or high 4 stars in the All-American game. Like, the kid has juice, and this team really lacked that last year. And I don't know how much of that was by design to just try to keep things in front of him or what, but it didn't work. Whatever that they were doing with the edges was completely – it just didn't help. Like, at some point, you've got to create some level of lack of comfort with the quarterback position, and we didn't do that at all last year. Quarterbacks had all day to throw on us and really never felt any true pressure. That has to change. And this is the position group that's responsible for that.
I'm very concerned about this because you're right. We just don't have any kind of pass rush, and Mitchell's been there for a little bit now. I want to see him play the best players, period. So, I don't care if they're freshmen. You're right about Nick Clay needs to get out there and play. Whatever needs to happen, whatever the personnel is, you've got enough people in the room that you should be able to be a bit more productive than you were last year. If it doesn't happen this year, I'm already kind of out on Matt Mitchell. If Matt Mitchell was gone, I'm no skin off my back. As far as I'm concerned, he isn't the guy that can really elevate our group. I think Luke Fickell after the season is going to replace probably Mike Tressel and Matt Mitchell. And I think he's going to have to bring in guys that can do it differently. I just don't see it with Matt Mitchell. He's, of all the coaches on this entire list, he's the one I'm most out on because we've been putrid. Let's just be blunt. I mean, it's not good enough.
The year before, we keep trotting Peterson out there, and they're going to play him because they're comfortable with him. And he's been completely ineffective. Like, he's not a pass rusher. And if I don't care, if you're playing him on the edge and you're saying that he's just going to be an edge setter, guess what? Eventually you get to third down, he's got to be able to pass rush. So if he's in on pass rush downs and he's completely just spinning his wheels like he was last year again, then you're going to have me during the season going, what the hell are you doing putting him out there if you know he can't get home? Because he's completely useless having out there on third down then. And
the other thing I would say about Mitchell that he has to improve on is developing and coaching the run fits too. Like, these guys have to be able to be better at not even just pass rushing, like setting the edge on run plays. Like, it's critical that the outside linebackers do their job on run defense plays. And last year that was a problem, and it continues to be an issue. So there's a lot of things from Matt Mitchell that I feel like are a lot more negatives than there are positives. And frankly, I don't see the upside, but we'll see what happens this year. Let's go to the secondary now. Talk about Jack Cooper and Paul Haynes. What are your thoughts?
I think from what we've seen over the last few cycles, I actually think Haynes is a pretty good talent evaluator, and I actually think that he's a pretty good coach. I think we'd say that the secondary, for the most part, has been a strength so far of the defense that hasn't been given a lot of help the last couple of years. And that needs to change because they're kind of being left on an island to be this great secondary, but there's no pressure being put on anyone. So they look worse simply because nobody's creating any, chaos out there for them to be able to, like, quarterbacks are left comfortable, and as a corner, you can only cover for so long.
Yeah, I'm okay with both of these guys actually, with Cooper and Haynes. I think I'm happy with our secondary, happy with the recruiting that we've done mainly. And I think that this is not the area of the defense that really bothers me. And it's really up front that bothers me. I'm perfectly acceptable and okay with where we are. I've got no issue. I think both these guys have upsides. I think both these guys can do what they need to do to get us above the line, which is what's desperately needed. We've gone a little bit long today, but let's end the show here on this question from Tyler Strieber. If Fickell fixes the offense with Grimes, but the defense with Tressel still struggles, what does that say about Fickell? Why not replace Longo and Tressel at the same time and fully start fresh in 2025? Justin, what's your take here on Tyler's question?
Yeah, I'm curious if the reason why we didn't make this change is that the defense, despite the fact that some of us really disliked what we saw from the defense, wasn't completely a train wreck until Iowa and Nebraska. Like, they've for the most part held their own until that point. I can understand saying, all right, you get one more shot, but I don't love it. Like, I was ready for him to be gone. I just don't like the style of defense we're playing. I think it's really frustrating to watch, and I worry that we're going to be better offensively this year, and we're just going to give it up on defense now because they're not capable of getting teams off the field.
Yeah, for me, I think he got the extra year because of his relationship with Fickell, and that's all he got, and that's the last one he'll get. I think Longo was clearly not gelling with Fickell at all. He's gone. Tressel does gel with Fickell. It's just the defense isn't working. He basically got, okay, we're changing our offense. We're changing the way, we're changing our recruiting. We're adding more size. Let's see what you can do now. And then that'll be it. I did forget to mention special teams. That's another thing about Matt Mitchell that annoys me. The special teams has been very inconsistent. And we need to get more recruiting in that department. We have Michael Sabine as our assistant special teams guy. Get better kickers. Punters okay.
Perhaps that's part of it. Yeah, punters, but we've done a pretty good job with punters. Place kicker, I don't know if there were some injury issues there or not. We'll see if he just was banged up or whatever last year. He wasn't good. I mean, that's got to change. Like we need him to be solid this year because he may be the difference. Like we see progress from this team. It's possible a couple of field goals is the difference between us being 6-6 and 8-4, or even 4-8 and 7-5 this year. Yeah. So he needs to step up and hit the routine ones. I don't care if you miss from 50, but you better be hitting the kicks from inside 40. You should be almost automatic from there.
It's very annoying to not have a good place kicker on this team, but we're happy with our punter, but not happy with Matt Mitchell. At least that's the moral of the story from me. We will end the show there. Sorry, we went a little bit long today. I had a lot of basketball and football to talk about. I went on way too long with basketball. That's my fault. But, I like talking basketball. Justin, final thoughts before we close the show.
Yeah, we're going to be back to a new week of preseason football here. So getting the spring practices back this week. Hopefully we start getting a lot more information as to what's going on, start to get a feel for, what we do have on the defensive side of the ball. I will say this, never take anything away from the spring too much. Like we've bought in the last couple of years. Let's just hope that this team is developing and gelling, and that I'm not going to look at individual players, but I do want to hear some things like the offense looks more cohesive, and I want to hear that defensive line looks like it's capable of having some good days and being a problem for the run game, at least.
Yeah, it's good to have spring back, which will be fun. I will not be here to talk about it. I will be in London next week. That's my big note for ending the show. Justin will have to do this one on his own. Maybe Nick or Ryan will join to talk. It'd be good to have Nick on, actually, to talk more about that spring football. But yes, I will be gone next week. I'm traveling to London to watch my soccer team play. Come on, you Spurs.
You can watch mine too.
What? Yeah, maybe yours too. I will be back in 2 weeks. Justin will be back again next Sunday to talk more about spring football. We'll end it there, folks. Thanks for listening. And as always, on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Bucky Report or The Bucky Report Podcast from wherever you get your content. Until next time, on Wisconsin.